Yeah, I remember early in the pandemic with people saying, "Oh, I can't wait for things to go back to normal." And I was already like,
They're not gonna.
it's never going to be normal
Yeah.
again. We'll have a new normal.
Yeah.
And like
And
I understand people who don't want the new normal to be masks and all this stuff because masks are not comfortable. So I understand the people who get upset about that. But it's like eventually we will find a new normal, but it will never be the same. Like
no.
there's a reason people have started calling it the before times
Well, yeah.
because this is a whole new era and things are completely different.
And I mean, there's a lot of people walking around angry because of the COVID stuff. And I do
Mhm.
think that COVID messaging was handled really badly,
Yeah.
especially in the US. But it was the way it trickled down to the public via science reporting.
Mhm.
It wasn't so much what this, because I used to watch the the live briefings. We had this thing where Teresa Tam, our head of public health, it would be
Mhm.
like, I call it Trudeau time, 11 a.m. every day. Justin Trudeau would do his little speech outside of Rideau Cottage, right? Because yes, it's Canada. The prime minister lives in something called a cottage.
Of
Uh,
course.
but you know, he'd do a speech and then they'd throw it over to the National Public Health response, and Teresa Tam would do a little talk, and she always said, this is what we know now. It's going to change. We expect it to change. We're giving our best guidance now.
Mhm.
When it changes, then we'll let you know. And one of the things that changed drastically was mask guidance,
Mhm.
right? Because initially they were like, no, we want to keep the masks in hospitals. Don't wear a mask. In part because they didn't have evidence it was actually airborne
Mhm.
at that point, but it was also they wanted to make sure there's enough personal protective equipment for frontline and hospital workers.
Yeah.
And then it changed, and everybody got up in arms because it changed. And if you watched the direct press conferences, the messaging was, this is going to change. It's a fluid situation. If you read the news, that an opinion, it seemed far more certain. It was COVID is not airborne. Masks don't help, instead of we don't see any evidence at the moment. That's not the same statement.
Yeah.
And when people are given these statements of certainty and then they're given another statement of certainty, of course they get angry. They feel messed with.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest thing we had with, I believe it was Fauci here, where it's like, oh no, masks won't make a difference. Okay, well now masks make a difference, and it's like, okay, but you said they didn't at first, and
Yeah,
like you
that
said, if it had been instead of this, well, this is it. If it had been so, as far as we know now, and it's like this is a time when was it Roosevelt who used to do the fireside chats?
yeah.
I'm asking a Canadian about American history.
Well, we knew. Yeah, we know about the
Yeah,
fireside chats. Yeah.
so it's like it would have been a great time to have something like Roosevelt's fireside chats. At the same time, our political system is so screwed over at the moment and
Well,
such a
yeah.
mess,
That was the
considering,
problem, right? In
yeah. So
America,
it's like,
people weren't all rowing together.
yeah.
Yeah.
And oh God, it's just getting worse.
Well, I was hoping that COVID would make people see what was important. That was naive because,
No, it became a political issue, and that was the worst possible thing that could have happened.
well, it became politicized, but it also became this thing people could uh, people could rage at.
Mm-hmm.
And the anger, I mean, and it is connected to control. Like, I saw it. People felt like, they're being denied these experiences. So much was made of, oh, kids didn't get to go to prom, kids didn't get to do this, kids didn't get to walk their graduation. And it's like, why are you making this into a tragedy? Because I mean, one of the things I do with the It's Not Therapy works, it's all about the narratives. You tell
Mm-hmm.
yourself about your experience, right? A
I
lot of
think I think especially here, those milestones, I think life here in many cases, especially in like the poor areas in the Midwest, those milestones have become
Rites of passage.
not even just rites of passage, but it's a glimmer in a very bleak existence. And I
Yeah, it's
used
the
to live,
movie moment, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
I used to live in an area that was very redneck and very poor.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the way they clung to these little moments. And so I get that why they made such a big deal out of it. And it's this idea that your prom is such a big deal because it's something you'll remember for the rest of your life, even though usually it tends to be miserable.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. No,
so
and I mean, part of it, I was a competitive semi-pro entertainer starting
mm,
at 12. And so the pageantry of prom, it's going to sound off, it didn't feel as special because I'd been doing plays and dance numbers and musicals and modeling and, that kind of stuff. And so it wasn't as important because I had other stuff.
yeah. And like for me, because I was homeschooled and then I got my GED when I was 16 or 17, um, I I didn't get to have the prom, and I'm like, but I wanted to wear a nice dress. I've still never had a reason in my life to wear a nice dress. And I still resent that. I'm 31.
Wow.
So yeah, I've moved on from the idea of prom, of course, because I'm like, you know what, that sounds like too much drama. I'm
Well,
better off without that. But I'm
I
still
mean, when
like,
you think about it, like none of the child actors in our favorite series got a prom. None of them went to school.
yeah, Mandy Moore had a song about that. Um, Mandy Moore was, I mean, you probably know her,
Yeah.
of her at least. She was
She's
picked
in
up
This
by,
Is Us, right? And she
yes,
was a singer. Yeah.
yeah, when she was picked up in the post Britney boom, where it's like all the
That's
other
right.
record labels were trying to have their own pop princess. So she was grabbed about
But
the same time Christina
Mandy
Aguilera
Moore, yeah,
was.
Mandy Moore can actually sing. I mean, Britney Spears can sing. They just do that stupid artificial voice on her.
Britney Spears has a really breathy voice that I personally find
It's
obnoxious.
affected. But yeah,
Yeah.
Mandy Moore has some pretty decent range and a pretty good tone. I remember when she was young because she was
Yeah.
like she like, compared to a Charlotte Church. She was like
Yeah.
kind of country, kind of gospel pop.
She's now gone into folk music,
Yeah, that makes
which is a
sense.
much better fit. She voices Rapunzel in
Right.
Tangled.
Yeah.
So it's like, and she was also she was in the Princess Diaries. She was the mean cheerleader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like of all those pop stars from that time, it seems like she grew up the most sane. And like I
Yeah.
said, now she does folk, and she hates the pop music that she did. And at one point, she did an interview with a DJ where she was like, you know, I wish if I could, I would pay up back everyone who bought a copy of my stuff.
Oh, it wasn't that bad. It was
Well,
just kind of popcorn.
well, he said, well, I bought it, and she turned around and handed him like 20
Oh
bucks.
no. Okay.
So,
I mean, she's joking, obviously.
yeah,
Like good for but that's a reclamation for her. Like she's allowed to hate her past work.
yeah. But and even that was like 15 years ago that she did that. But one of her more recent albums, she had a song that was all about no regrets with a few exceptions.
I remember
And
that
she,
song. Okay,
yeah, and
yeah.
she mentions no prom, no graduation, no college in the fall.
Yep.
And so it's like, yeah, there is that. And we often, you know, that's the thing, you know, there's this back and forth of, was Michael Jackson awful? Was he okay? Was he innocent? Was he guilty? Was he not? And I'm like, you know, in a way, I don't care, because whatever he was, it was absolutely a case of he was made that way.
Yeah,
Because
so much went wrong in
yeah,
that.
you
Yeah.
hear the stories of like there was a playground practically right across the street from the recording studio
Yeah.
where they worked, and he's little 6 7 year old Michael looking out the car windows like, well, why can't I go play
Yeah.
with the other kids? And if there was ever a case that any any love he had for children, whether it was appropriate or inappropriate or whatever happened, I would absolutely say it comes down to it was a reaction to his own childhood and the childhood he didn't have. And it may have become corrupted, but that's one case where I can definitely say, oh, well, I see where it came from.
I mean,
At the very
his
least.
kids seem okay. And that, I
Whether or
mean,
not they're actually his is a question.
yeah, I mean, they definitely look like their mom.
Yeah.
But his kids seem okay. Now, apparently the grandmother had a lot to do with that. I think that's one of those cases that we're never going to know what happened there because the whole information source has been so polluted.
Yeah. After he died, I remember seeing his parents do an interview with Oprah, and his father was like, "Oh, I was a stern disciplinarian," and his
I
mother's like,
remember that interview.
"You
Yeah.
abused them," and I'm like, "Were you saying that 40 years ago, or are you just realizing this now
What,
that
that he
you
abused
lost?"
them?
Yeah. Well,
Oh, I mean,
was
that
she?
was,
I mean, I'm sure she knew it, but like, was she saying it then? Or is it
uh,
just something she's saying now? She's like, oh, I lost one of my kids to this.
yeah, well, I mean, in a way, she lost quite a few of her kids to it, right? Because of,
True.
Latoya's issues, and it's, I mean, tragic family, right? And there's a lot that went on there. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing that we see depictions of that stuff in the media. And, it's the weepy woman victim,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is why I was really compelled by the show Westworld. And,
I'm sorry it's been canceled.
I mean, okay, the third season got away from what made it good, but talk about a treatise in female rage,
Yeah.
right? Between Thandaway Newton and Evan Rachel Wood. And I know some people can't stand her now because the Marilyn Manson thing, and let's set that aside, whatever you feel about it. But her transformation from this wide-eyed painter girl on the Western frontier to hating the world was so poignant. It
Mm-hmm.
was so believable, and she really did hit those spots. You believed she was angry and hateful, and there was the core of who she was, and they dealt with them. I mean, she had a male persona, right, hidden
Mm-hmm.
underneath it all, Wyatt. But she really brought the anger, and Thandaway Newton also brought the anger of someone who's been abused. And I think that it's a big problem when it comes to how women are judged and how women are treated when they talk about abuse, that because we have the whole weepy victim TV thing, that's not what abused people often present as. Rose
Mm-hmm.
McGowan, right? Ray Fisher blaming everyone and everything. People think that's an indication that he's lying. It's not. And this is a really difficult thing to explain unless you've actually gone through trauma and PTS. So bear with
Yeah.
me here. But there is a point where it is everyone's fault, right? The
Mm-hmm.
minute you admit something awful happened to you, and they have a scene in God of War Ragnarok that is sort of played for laughs in a way, but it's a similar thing where Freya was blaming everybody for not coming after her.
Mm-hmm.
And poor Freyr is, they set me on fire. That
Oh
was the
yeah, I've
actual
seen that
line.
one.
That was the actual line. And then you notice the burn scarring on his
Yeah.
arm, but she's like, basically, I don't care, you didn't come after me. And I'm like, they set him on fire, Freya. And okay, over the top, but I was laughing because it's like, yeah, I remember being in that place where I didn't care why people didn't help me. I was just so finally able to feel that powerlessness that it came up in a lot of weird places.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you've been through it and you own it and you're aware of it, you get better at seeing it in other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Ray Fisher showed signs of that. Rose McGowan, definitely. Like, something awful happened to that woman. And I mean, the shots she took at Alyssa Milano were not fair. But unfortunately, some people, when they're just, you're not allowed to talk about it for so long, and you finally can, it comes out in weird ways. And this is where the whole believe women thing becomes very complicated, because you can't just let people falsely accuse people, right? There has to be an evidentiary standard. And a lot of the time, I don't think courts are a good place for healing. They're not a good place. It's not. When I was in, well, it was high school and then university, the idea of the legal system versus the justice system came back in, that we called it the legal system instead of the justice system because it was about the law, not about justice. Right. And of course, that's the terminologies changed to social justice and criminal justice and economic justice instead of the legal system. And then the concept of justice, terms change. Basic divisions are the same. The legal system is not always just.
There's a quote from Shakespeare, and I hate that I can't remember the first
I know
word
the
of
one
it.
you're, yeah.
Something is at its best when mercy tempers justice.
Yeah. And I'm very interested in the concept of restorative justice. And I think that can be the outcomes it's gotten in terms of abuse and neglect, and especially college campus sexual assault. They're fantastic. And it's based on the principle of, it's not about punishment. It's not about it's not about a judge deciding. It's about somebody just, the guy who did it having to hear the impact of what he did from the victim, or she did. It's more often men, but not always.
Of course.
And I really do think, as somebody who's been abused, that is more what I found useful. I mean, I went to the cops and wasn't believed because it was a female stalker, not a male stalker. But just the ability to talk about it and to say it was wrong, and for it to be real, because it is so not like what you see on TV that you start questioning whether it happened at all. And that's crazy making, right? And, sitting on the whole Joss Whedon thing for 10 years, knowing about it and trying to sound the alarm through his work. And then it finally comes up. And I mean, that was really hard. And I wasn't even one of his victims. I heard it from somebody. Right. And, at the time, it was very clear the person who told me was telling the truth. And, what do you do with it? There's so many of those stories, is people need to talk. And when people wonder, why doesn't anybody say anything? It's because the person has to be ready to go through getting pilloried by popular opinion. And, the Megan Thee Stallion thing, if you listen to Megan Thee Stallion's music, it's not for everybody. I acknowledge that. But if you listen to Megan Thee Stallion's music, that rage is all through it. Like, WAP is an angry song.
Oh yeah.
I don't care. And that is a song about anger and spite and letting it all hang out. It's an FU track. And people miss that a lot of sexualization, especially hip hop sexualization, is an expression of anger. There's a lot of resentment. And I mean, okay, Nicki Minaj in the Anaconda video bites a banana in half. That was on the nose, right? But one of the things I always connected to in hip hop, going right back to, Queen Latifah's stuff in the late 80s, that there was that underpinning of working it out. And it wasn't as understood. And the female rappers, up until this day, the female rappers are not treated as the same talent as the male rappers. And I think it's because people don't see the artistry because they don't understand what they're saying. Because more often than not, it's the Black female experience, and they don't see the anger and the pain that's being interpreted through metaphorical lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, Megan Thee Stallion writing a song about, oh, gee, women aren't one thing. I mean, that's what Savage is about, right?
Yeah.
The different, she's trying to do the modern matriarch crone virgin whore mentality, right? Virgin whore dichotomy, the ratchet, bougie, classy. And people are like, what's ratchet? What's bougie? Right? And yeah, okay, those are idioms where ratchet is basically you got money, but you don't have class.
Yeah.
So, you know, the price tag on the hat because you're going to take it back kind of thing, or, you know, the leopard, anything leopard print is on the border of bougie and ratchet. And, you know, bougie is sort of suburbs,
Yeah.
right? Like Beyonce's bougie. And then you got classy, probably embodied by Zendaya.
It's really the evolution of the old money versus the nouveau riche.
Yeah, it's very Atlanta.
That came around in the Gilded Age.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. That the Black middle class is having a Gilded Age moment.
Yeah. There's a live action Disney movie. It's kind of little known, but it's The Happiest Millionaire, I believe it's called.
Okay.
Fred MacMurray.
Oh my gosh. You're going back. I love those Fred MacMurray movies.
Yeah, it was the last live action movie that Walt Disney actually had a hand in before he passed. Okay. But so it's this old Philadelphia family, basically. The movie is based on a book. I'm not even going into the pedigree behind this. It's too complicated. The guy's daughter married a member of the Duke family who founded the Duke University. Okay. But there is a song towards the end where the great aunt meets the daughter's mother-in-law to be, and it's old money versus new money. And it's at one point the aunt says, though the nouveau riche deny it, all their money cannot buy it, class will out.
Right.
And so it's like, you know, I've heard that song and seen that movie, and then I watched The Gilded Age when it came out earlier this year, and I'm like, oh, this is like the song but serious and Julian Fellows.
Well, I mean, that's the trap J.K. Rowling found herself in, right? That she thought buying a castle would make her appear. Yeah. She still knew money. And I swear that's part of the reason she went so crazy.
Yeah.
Like there were signs of bitterness with her even before. But I mean, one of the things that people need to realize is a lot of authors aren't terribly nice people. They spend a lot of time alone torturing characters for money. I used to work with a lot of authors. I speak with this on authority. There's some very nice ones, but the genuinely nice people are often either part-time writers or Ed Greenwood. Ed Greenwood is the nicest freaking man. So Forgotten Realms fans out there know Ed Greenwood. He's got a spicy sense of humor, but he's a very nice dude. But there's a weird anger in authors. And I think part of it is they write these stories about beautiful, exciting people. And writing is such a solitary endeavor. Yeah. Right? And I know I have to just turn out the world when I'm doing certain types of writing. You do have to get into it, and you're in another place. And when you finish a story, I mean, I think you went through some of this recently. We used to call it with sci-fi conventions, post-con blues.
Yes.
That you do this weekend and it would be this, you know, taking you away from the world, and it would be so much fun, but you know, you sort of neglected your health, didn't sleep much, probably drank too much, ate bad food. And then when you come out of it, even though you had a great time, you feel depressed.
Yeah.
And if people don't have communities where they can talk to people about that experience and learn that it's normal, right? Because you know as well as I do, if something you're like, what's happening to me, it's scary. And someone goes, okay, yeah, you know, this is normal. I mean, my first really bad crunch as a game dev, it was awful, but the way people I knew in the industry were so supportive was really beautiful. It's an indication of how some good stuff can come out of ugliness. And these guys who I'd known as a journalist, and they don't talk to you very much when you're a journalist. The minute you get out of it, all of a sudden they tell you a lot more. But you know, these guys all of a sudden were like, make no decisions for 2 weeks. You're gonna feel this, you're gonna feel that. You just gotta let it pass. It will, you know, they knew how to. It was like the game dev version of that scene in She-Hulk where in the bathroom. Right. It was that sort of thing of just people I didn't really know very well, all of a sudden giving really good advice and giving a shit.
Well, you know, on your note about when something happens to you and you don't always understand it, like
Yeah.
when my grandfather died, a few days later, I was at church. I was very religious at the time. And I found myself just kind of sitting in the lobby against the wall. And one of the women came over and she's like, "So what's going on?" And I'm like, "I don't understand why I feel like this and why I just feel yada yada." And she's like, "Okay, well, what's been going on?" And I'm like, "Well, this and that. And my grandfather died." And she's like, "Honey, that's exactly it."
Right.
And I do still have it because it's like in the last few months, you know, I've gotten sick. I transferred to a new location at work, and you know, I feel bad right now because like Calidus Chronicles has been on hiatus for a little bit now, and it's gonna go a little longer because now I'm focusing on actually editing volume 1 and getting it out.
No.
And I feel bad, but then I look at everything that's going on and I'm like, okay, there is a reason. This isn't just that I'm lazy
Oh, you're
or
working. It's just editing is a grueling process.
oh god,
I
it
mean,
is.
even providing notes, some people don't know. I do like reads on things like that. I edited an anthology. Even that is it's editing is harder than writing, as
Yeah,
far as I'm concerned. It'll drive you crazy.
yeah. Well, even it's like I've started working on the next chapter that'll go up in the serialization, and it's not bad. It's just there's a couple points where like I need to add dialogue and expand it, and
Mm-hmm.
every time I sit down to do it, I'm like, it
Oh,
just
I've been having issues
yeah,
in that regard too. And I know it's I'm taking on um too much of the wrong stuff
yeah.
in day-to-day life, and I cannot shake it off enough. And it's not, you know, it's funny because people ask me all the time, how do you do all this mental health work? And I'm like, are you kidding? That is soul food. You know, the authenticity, the you know, the trust and everything like that, that feeds me. It's the bullshit that, you know, I'm not somebody who can create angry, right? I think it's partially because a lot of the stuff I do is comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and there are just things I see that are so angering and so unjust that sometimes I have a really hard time um shaking that off.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, being able to actually give people stuff that can do something about their situation, that feels good. It feels useful, right? Sitting there and watching someone just be tortured online for nothing, that feels bad. And I think a lot of us are walking around angry at some mistreatment or other. And I think that sense of powerlessness is a big part of it. You know, you just want to get something to move and you can't get it to move.
Yeah. Yeah. I woke up this morning to two separate YouTube notifications that actually got me angry in two separate ways. One was I had I'd commented on a video from one of my favorite YouTubers, and this was an older comment, and someone came back with this totally infactual.
Oh
Well,
God.
what you're saying? Okay, so the video had been talking about femininity, and I had there it was a response to someone else who'd said something rude, and I made a comment, as a woman with infertility issues, um I hate the way so many men are just like, oh, if these women are so into traditional femininity or whatever, they should just go have kids. And I'm like,
Ugh.
shut up. Um,
Ugh.
and so someone responded to my comment and said, but her whole ideology is that if you can't have children, then you're not a woman. And I'm like, okay, look,
What?
I have followed it's the Authentic Observer. Okay. I know some of your subscribers have recognized me over there, so I don't feel
Oh,
too
okay,
bad
okay,
mentioning it.
yeah.
And it was specifically on her Vosh video. And I'm like, okay, look, people try to use that excuse with her that, oh, well, she talks about the divine feminine and this and that. So she's trans exclusive, or like you have to be able to have kids. And I'm like, look, I've watched enough of
What?
her videos that I know that is not where she's coming from.
That's
And
not, the divine feminine has nothing to do with literal fertility.
some people try to make it that. And that's what makes
No,
it
it's not. It's
and
not.
now that I've name dropped her, it actually brings it around, because she was actually the reason I started thinking about rage so much. Because in one of her videos, she mentioned, she talked about that idea that the manosphere has this belief that, femininity is all sweetness and compliance. And one thing she talked about is like, are we forgetting that the idea of the mother bear
Yeah.
and the ferocity a woman will go to protect her child and to protect her home.
Yeah.
And it's like, to disregard that and to act as if rage is not a part of femininity. And when we were talking, part of why I said I specifically want it to be feminine rage and the divine feminine is because it's the way I see it. At least I'm sure there are some people who do use it to be trans exclusive. I do include trans women in that, because it's like, if
Oh,
that's
yeah.
your energy, if that's who you are, if that's part of you, it's who you are. That just is what it is. And it's like this, and I think this is part of why I love Yennefer so much.
Oh, Yennefer's
And
great. I mean, that scene in The Witcher 3 where she like destroys that tree.
a garden, the
Yeah,
entire
just such a beautiful metaphor.
and just especially since it does come down to, it is that she's a mother. It doesn't matter that she didn't give birth to Ciri. That is her daughter,
Yeah.
and no one will stand in her way. And there's this meme of men writing women badly. Well, Sapkowski wrote one of the best depictions of feminine rage that I have ever been able to relate to. I talk about how
I do think the Witcher 3 dev team added to her as well in a good
oh
way.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, they did.
Yeah.
So, I've talked about with MJ from Spider-Man and how I look at her past and I relate to it so much. But I didn't become the party girl. Like, that's the whole thing about MJ, is she presents this front, she's the party girl, she has a good time, nothing bothers her. It's not until you get closer to her that you actually start to see that that is a complete mask for the pain.
Oh,
And
totally.
that
Yeah.
wasn't what I did. And then I found Yennefer, and I'm like, oh, and I couldn't even figure it out at first. I'm like, what is it? What is it that draws me to this? And then watching the Authentic Observer's video where she talked about feminine rage, and I'm like, oh, that's it. Because I get that. I get that taking these years of pain and abuse and being used, and it's like that quote you said,
Yeah,
with
the amulet of pain.
the amulet of
Yep.
pain. But for me, it's internal. It's like I can just feel it there, like just lightning in a bottle.
Well, that's why I thought, the scene in She-Hulk that everybody freaked out of. I wish that scene had not been released in preview. Like, I wish it had not been an ad out of context, because I think that if it had just been presented in the context of what was going on, I thought Tatiana Maslany's performance there, where she almost lost it like 3 or 4 times before she started fully turning green. And that whole idea is, she's more in control of her anger because she feels angry all the time.
Yeah. I think the big problem with that scene was it touched on things that absolutely are valid, but they've become talking
Face.
points in the
Yeah.
culture war,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, being catcalled isn't that bad. And it's like, on one hand, yes, I do think, I remember when the Me Too hashtag first ran around and I
Yeah.
saw girls talking about and posting about, oh, my hashtag Me Too is one time I was walking and these guys whistled at me. And I'm like, is it appropriate? No. But if that's what you're posting about, you are taking away from the women who have actually experienced something, and you're watering it down.
What's funny is, this is going to be a huge overshare. There was a period where I got catcalled a lot.
Yeah.
And there are different categories of catcalling. Some of them do feel incredibly demeaning and menacing. Others,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, others, I remember I was down on the Vegas Strip. I think I was actually there for AVN that year, the Adult Video News Awards. And yes, there is a porn convention in Vegas. But everybody's
where
like,
else
what?
would it be?
Tell me more. Well, yeah, you could only do it in Vegas. But
well, Holland, maybe.
Yeah, but Holland. But I was walking the Strip. I was right outside the MGM, I remember. And this guy rolls down his window and screams at me in his car, "Red in the head means fire in the bed." And I was like,
knew what was going on that week.
I don't know. But I was just, that's absurd. And I started laughing, and I actually sort of walked a little taller for a few blocks. Back when you could walk the Vegas Strip. You can't anymore. They put up all these stupid people catchers so people don't walk into traffic. But it was like, it was just not like, that was just weird. But other things, you're in certain circumstances, especially at work, where a guy gets inappropriate, and it is very scary.
Yeah. And it's like, I totally get that. And so, like, when I mention people posting with the hashtag Me Too, it's not that I discredit that is emotional and it can be scary. It's just,
Let's put it
it's a bit much to conflate that and sexual assault.
Well, of course. I mean, the fact that we even have to say that, but I do think a big problem with, I'm going to drop the F word, with feminist writing is so much of it is first person experience. And just because someone had something happen to them doesn't mean, everyone is a Sylvia Plath and can be poignant about their experiences. And to me, you do need a certain amount of time from the thing that happened to you. I am not a big advocate of people, the internet is not supportive when it comes to talking about your abuse. No. You're going to get as much negatives as positives. And I've fought with people about it, where I've actually said, get this person off the internet. She's not in the place for it. And I said she there because it happened to be a woman, but there are some men too.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I do think that, I forget, Jonathan Haidt has a term for it, that we're the victimized society, that there's this valor in victimhood, I think he called it. And
I can see it.
Yeah. And that was my real issue with the Witcher Netflix series, as opposed to the books and the game. Because in the books and the game, there are these hints of what happened to Yennefer. But we don't know what happened because she doesn't want anyone to know what happened.
The closest we see is when literally the goddess Freya gives her a trial.
That's right.
And drags her through some of her memories.
Right. But
saying, okay, who are you? And Yennefer tells her, it doesn't matter.
That's
who
right.
I was. What matters is who I am, and you are not going to stop me from saving my daughter.
Yeah. And I read that and was like, yes, yeah. You do get to a point where you cannot be defined. You're informed by what happened to you. It's a part of your story. You can't unsee the truths, but you're not defined by things that were done to you. And I thought that the problem with the Netflix show is it rolled around in the body horror of Yennefer's past. And I thought it was stupid and maudlin and oh God, can we not? But I felt it violated her because
Mhm.
Yennefer would never want people to see Yennefer that way.
No. And
And that is, it's weird because there's a female showrunner on that show, and that just felt like a betrayal.
I think there is a bit of pop feminism and that black pill feminism that we've talked about, where it is all about reveling in it because saying, this is our struggle as women.
I also think that they felt that some of Yennefer's defining qualities needed to be justified instead of just being this is who she is. And so, you know, the weaponized sexuality, the fact that she does use any means to get what she wants, for whatever reason, they thought it was better to make you feel sorry for her to justify the actions instead of just letting people take her for what she is. And I think
And
that was a mistake.
it was. And it's Yennefer is always going to be, she's not everyone's taste.
I mean,
You know?
that to me is an example of internalized misogyny.
Yeah.
You know, I think that for some odd reason they wanted to focus on Yennefer instead of using the various women in Geralt's life, because, you know, the juxtaposition, especially in the games, of Triss and Yennefer, they make each other better in terms of characters because they are so different.
And, you know, I think one thing the show really doesn't accept is all of these characters are awful people. And there is this thing, I saw it on Tumblr, and
I'd say cynical people instead of awful people.
I mean, they all do some pretty awful things. Even
Yeah,
Geralt.
but good. I mean, well, Geralt, we could get in the whole psychology Geralt of Rivia at some point. But I mean, people forget witchers are tortured. Like, that's what's interesting. They show all the horrible awfulness that happens to Yennefer. They don't show the witcher process, which is agonizing and terrible and
And Geralt did
does
it
stuff to
twice.
them. Yeah, and does
Geralt
stuff
is the
to them.
only one to survive it twice.
Yeah. And that's, I think, why he's so taciturn. I mean, in the books, he doesn't shut up. But you know, the game and you get the sense that he's still, because people who go through intense physical trauma, the certain things in their bodies, certain biochemistry, certain nervous reactions do hyperactivate. And so he'd be constantly, you know, brain like Daredevil's vision, like a world on fire. And these are all the nuances that are in the books, especially if you get one of the better fan translations. And in the games, well, 3, I think, really understood the characters the best. 1 and 2 were kind of rough in that regard, but 3 really nailed it. But you know,
and the thing is, before 3 is the only one that actually has the heart of the books, which
well, because
is
Yennefer's in it and Ciri's in it.
Exactly. And that's what the first 2 were missing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's the only reason why I like the series, is because of those 3. Because, you know, I've talked about it, liking the series is so uncharacteristic for me because I don't like miserable, I don't like grim dark, I don't like tragedy. But those 3, there's something about their family, that just, that's what keeps me here.
I have never understood the requirement that a child be someone's own DNA. I don't get the idea that you love a child more because you've got some, you know, genealogy. You love people because you love them, not because of some ego. And I do think that even though, you know, Triss and Yennefer have a really difficult relationship because they're fighting over Ciri. And that, I mean, that's very Eastern European as well, right? Because this is the only way either of them are going to be mothers.
Yeah.
So they're very.
Although Triss never really wants to be her mother. She just wants to be the cool sister.
Yeah, they just step on each other a lot that way,
she gets
right?
to sleep with Geralt.
Right.
then
Right.
she would do anything.
Triss is something of a pitiable figure, and they really changed that in the games. That in the books, Triss is allergic to magic, and so she can't hide her scars, and she's got this mousy hair, and she's not what she is in the games. That people freaked out about the actress they cast in the Witcher Netflix series, but they changed Triss from her book description. There's no denying that. But the characterization, I mean, she was so frustrating for so long. And I mean, the ending I got for her was very redemptive because she stopped being a doormat.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that even with all the promiscuity in The Witcher, Yennefer and Triss do have boundaries. If in the game, if you sleep with both of them, you don't get either of them.
Yep.
And I was like, that we need more of that, right? Put all the boobs and butts and nudity and close and everything in it, as long as you're getting the good stuff in like that. That you don't just get to sleep with whoever you want and expect women to be okay with it, or men. And just because they're okay with you having casual flings doesn't mean they're okay with somebody who you actually have competing feelings for.
Yeah.
And that is totally fair. People have the right to set boundaries that way. And I do think that part of feminine rage is the some men are going to get really pissed off to hear this, but there are paths for men to get it right. They're not easy. They're very narrow, but there are paths, and there are multiple paths. There's multiple archetypes that are socially acceptable, not completely accepted, but socially acceptable. No matter what type of woman you are, you're either a whore or you're invisible. You're either bitchy or you're dumb. You're either a dragon lady or you're a doormat. There is no happy medium still. And I think that there's been a lot of media that has attempted to deal with that. I mean, House of the Dragon was very on the nose, and Game of Thrones was very on the nose with the whole dragon lady thing, right? Very on the nose. But I mean, I don't know, even then they played off the sort of, oh, look, they're wearing pants kind of thing. It's George R. Martin. We can only expect so much. But I find that every show that attempts to deal with the inability there's no needle to thread there. It's just a pin. And the fact that that is still a reality, every media that attempts to do that eventually becomes a caricature of itself, except in video games. Some video game series, man, and I'm not talking about The Last of Us 2. Oh my God, hot garbage.
Let's pretend that doesn't exist for a minute.
Well, the thing is that it's actually relevant to this because it is a game about angry women.
True.
But it's a game about angry women, but it's not feminine rage. It is a very masculine depiction of what it means to be angry. And there's so much of that you see. I think it was House of the Dragon that I said there is no female experience in this entire show.
There's no genuine female experience.
Yeah, there's no genuine female experience. Like, yeah, there's female writers and all that stuff, but they're so hung on the source material that I guess they couldn't quite shoehorn it in.
I guess.
Right. And that's what's weird about the Witcher show. The first season, I stopped watching because I just couldn't anymore. There's only so much Henry Cavill can carry something. I was actually kind of glad when he left because it's like, okay, now there's no reason for me to watch it. Right?
Yeah.
But just because, and I've said this the entire time I've worked in media, just because women are on a team does not mean that they are experts in being women, and it's the same way that just because a man's somewhere doesn't mean he's mature, right? Just because someone's a male who's age of majority doesn't mean he's a man. I'll stand by that. There is a difference mentally between a man and a boy. And that's why I push back so hard against the whole like adult human female, adult human male. Anybody that says that that's all there is to being a man or being a woman, it's like, give me a damn break.
That's like I talked about. For me, the definition of the divine feminine, it's your energy.
Yeah. Oh, it's
And
totally your energy.
it's not just, is it chaotic, is it this or that, it's, is is that what powers you? Is that what flows through your veins, basically, in a metaphorical spiritual sense, because I'm weird like that.
Oh, I totally know what you mean. I mean, when I know an inordinate number of transgender people, I don't know why. Maybe because I'm me, but
Probably.
you know, the when you know a trans person, you get it because their energy is the gender they say they are.
Mm-hmm.
It is just undeniable when you are in their presence. You don't necessarily get that from the internet. When they get into, you know, oh, this is just performance and stereotype. No, it's not. When you sit with people, you feel it. You feel that, yes, this is right,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to this is, and people can be at odds with their natures for a lot of different reasons. That's just one of them.
Yeah.
But I've had to be very careful in my writing, and I think that's why I'm so attuned to it in other stuff, about the idea of there is no universal female experience, and the utopia that I would be comfortable in would be absolute hell for a different type of woman. Right? And I have to be aware of that and make sure I'm not cutting off valid feminine experiences because mine is just ish.
Yeah.
You know, I think about the really bad D&D characters I played when I was younger, working shit out. It's like, ironically, they were always sort of Yennifers. They were always female sorceresses, right? Who had kind of a mean streak. And it was a way of processing anger. It was a way of processing aggression that I was punished for. And I wasn't even punished as badly as some people were, because I grew up in a, you know, kind of a rough neighborhood, and a certain amount of aggression was more accepted because, you know, sliding
You had to
scale.
survive.
Yeah, sliding scale. Uh, but I see the stuff that other people go through. I mean, the royal family shit is just, it's like a car wreck. I can't look away.
Mhm.
You know, when they're, oh my God, Kate Middleton's heel is dirty. She's in grass. Of course it's dirty. But you talk to Brits and they're like, this is the game. This is all they do. This is the tradition.
Yeah.
And it's like, shit, like, yeah.
Like, that's the thing for me. Whenever I see people say, oh, well, what does the royal family do other than just take tax money?
They
And I'm
sell a
like,
lot of product.
there's that. And
Yeah.
it's also when I see people talk about like the old days, the leisure rich, like
Yeah.
Downton Abbey, where it's like, oh, they didn't have to do any hard work. I'm sorry. They had to deal with people.
Yeah.
They had to there was still a level of work to it.
Well, you find out, you know, the Queen advised every prime minister. There were weekly meetings.
Exactly. And
You
it's
know,
like you see the pressure on the royal family, and I'm like, you know what, $38 million in taxpayer money doesn't seem all that bad when you consider the pressure that's on them
well,
and how they're expected to look and behave. It's they're expected to perform.
oh yeah, they're mascots.
Exactly.
They're mascots. And what do people do with mascots? They walk up to them and smack them in the back of the head. That's a little mascot rage. I did mascot work. I love mascot work, but you do not know blinding, seething rage until you are in a mascot suit and somebody hits the back of that head. Like, oh, you just want to murder some, because it doesn't actually hit your head. It because the head sits on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like your head is a clapper and a bell.
Oh God.
And they're usually pinned or velcroed on so they can't hit the head off, because that's what they used to do.
Yeah.
And so it's this full upper body bell rung phenomenon. And you just want to kill the little shit who did it. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe some of the work I did because of that, you have, because if you don't learn to process that anger, you walk around angry all the time. And that doesn't mean it's a failure if somebody's walking around angry all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's reasons to be walking around angry all the time, but I'm really concerned about the number of people who are angry so commonly they don't even realize it's anger anymore, because
Well,
anger's bad, so of course they don't feel it.
well, like I said, it was only in the last few days that I've been thinking about this a lot. And, it made me realize, oh, this is why I love Yennefer. But it also just kind of clicked for me while we were talking. Ever since I was young and I discovered the Greek gods, I'd I'd think about like, okay, which one's my favorite? And for a while I would force it to be Aphrodite because I'm a
Interesting.
romantic.
Okay. I always like
But
Minerva.
well, it's interesting because the one I actually always kept coming back to, I just tried to deny, was Hera.
Oh, okay.
And it's like, I didn't know why. I'm like, yeah, she's the goddess of marriage, but why Hera? I get it now. Because everyone talks about, oh, Hera, she's such a bitch. She keeps doing this and doing that.
Well,
And
she's
I'm
a
like,
queen.
one, she's a queen, but it's like the if you ever want to talk about a patriarchal society, the Greeks absolutely were.
Oh yeah.
And Hera isn't just a queen, she's queen of the gods, but
Yep.
that means her husband is king of the gods.
She's married to the second biggest asshole in all of polytheism.
Who's the first?
Odin.
You know what?
I hate Odin. Oh, everything is Odin's fault.
Pretty much, yeah. So, and everything she does, and I look at it, and in a way, it's you look at the power a woman didn't have
Yeah.
in Greece.
Yeah, she's very
And
much the power of influence and persuasion.
yes, and
Yeah.
she's very much, she is the feminine rage
Oh
where
yeah. She
you've
gets
been
really angry in some stories.
exactly. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's why it's always been Hera. That's why that's who I would choose as my patron, is because of that anger.
I
I
mean,
think
there was a while there after I originally played Dragon Age Origins where I still love Flemeth from Dragon Age.
Mhm.
And she's basically Granny Weatherwax with cooler costumes. But I mean, Kate Mulgrew voices her, which gives you a sense, but you see her and she's the typical crone in the woods eating people, but she's got this, yes, she's Granny Weatherwax, but she has a quippiness that
Mhm.
is different. Granny Weatherwax always has that sort of seething cauldron of rage, and she
Mhm.
does quip, but it's less. I mean, there are shades. Kriya and Flemeth are both inspired by Granny Weatherwax and BioWare canon. But I remember, she's very big on manners. And I more and more understand why. I liked it when I first encountered the character. I love the character immediately. But and then it turns out there's more to Flemeth than they originally let on. It's BioWare character, of course, but she's very big on manners. And yes, they're pulling from the crone myth, but manners, the ability to insist that people treat you with dignity and respect. That's the difference between walking around angry and afraid all the time and not feeling like you can control those circumstances.
And a, a while back in one of our recordings, I brought up etiquette, and I said,
Yeah.
I think that's what I was trying to get at. Was
Yeah.
it's like just have some manners and civility, and it's like that's what I would have loved to have said to that customer that I dealt with was just don't treat people like that.
See, I started saying with customers like that of, I'm moving as fast as I can.
Yeah.
It's
And like I did say that. And
yeah,
when
yeah.
he
I
called me,
I say I say to people when I'm in management and somebody's doing that, I say, hey, everybody's new once. I just have no patience for people who do that.
yeah.
Like that
But
guy's
what
behavior just disgusts me.
yeah. Well, like when he called me incompetent, I looked at him and I said, "Sir, that's not necessary."
Good for you.
Well, his response was, "Yes, it is." I'm like,
Okay,
okay,
that's
whatever.
that's a weak, like that's what Greta Thunberg would call small dick energy though. Okay, like whatever anybody has to go, yes, it is. That's weak, right? Like you won that
Thank you.
because it wasn't necessary. No, it's never necessary to be to be nasty to somebody. It may temporarily feel in control. I don't even say it temporarily feels powerful, but it may temporarily feel less awful, but it's never necessary. There's always another way. And you have to have an example of that other way to learn the other way. And that's why, the lack of mentorship, the fact that people are getting their socialization from Chans and Reddit and shit like that, it's got me really freaked out.
Yeah.
Because
and it's like, I understand why men are drawn to the manosphere. I get it, but it's still not right.